certainly a privilege for me to be here today with many folks that I know and have been in this industry for almost 35 years now. Started with the Comdex machine, as many of you have heard over the years. Worked with Bob Priestek and Vinny Polito. Went over to Reed for a few years and then ended up at SME where I'm in my 15 plus years. We are all here today because this industry matters to us. And so when we think about that, we all need to be obsessed with change and innovation. Ultimately, what we heard this morning and what we all care about is the creation of value, right? Because you can say it a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, if you provide value to your exhibitors, if you provide meaningful interaction to your attendees, then you've got a good solution. Remember that our customers are at the center of everything we do. And our customers aren't only your exhibitors and your attendees, your exhibitors and your sponsors. Our exhibitors and our sponsors generate the majority of the revenue that we benefit from. But you've got to keep in mind that your attendees, your conference delegates, your advisors, your volunteers, and today your staff are equally important customers that you have to take care of. We all understand that customers are changing. We heard from Ken, we heard from everyone this morning about how change is taking over. So we need to invest a lot more time focusing on innovation, identifying new communities, creating that value for those communities. And then the last piece, which is the most important, is delivery. That's where a lot of us create all of those features and put them into our events. And we go to our meetings, in our case, as a non-for-profit, to our board, and we kind of say, look at all this great stuff we do. But when we really, really start to scrape and we talk to our exhibitors and our attendees, as we heard again from Ken this morning, not all of them are deriving the value that we are portraying. So it's extremely important to be able to deliver against that value. Over the years, I've heard a lot about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's easy for us in our industry because we've done it. I've heard it now for over 30 years. Would we be this successful? Would our events be growing? Would our revenue be there if we weren't doing things correctly? And the reality is, a lot of us are innovators. A lot of us are making changes. But you really, really have to understand that what's happening and what we're going to talk about this afternoon is that there is a huge demographic, generational change occurring. And those that are coming into the positions that we've occupied for years now do not approach the event and their decisions the way we did. So behind the scenes, these demographic and seismic generational changes are going to impact all of us. So during our discussion today, we're going to talk quickly about the changing demographics, how that needs to really impact the customer experience, how important it is to change the internal mindset. Finding a sponsor to sponsor an area that provides value needs to be replaced by identifying a community that brings value to your event, that you need at your event, regardless of sponsor money or funding for the project. Think about cost of acquisition, and the minute you start to say, whether I'm spending $200, $250 to bring an attendee in and then get sponsors money, or I invest in bringing the community in, therefore creating that value that can be sponsorable, is a huge philosophical shift. So we need to create the attendee value. We need to create those new communities, and this is what we're going to cover with the panelists that we have. So let's get started. Let me introduce this very unique group of panelists. I need to tell all of you one thing, and that is the following. None of them are event industry executives. They are, however, diverse senior leaders. They represent exhibitors who've bought space. They represent attendees at events. They represent association creators, community creators. They have done all of it, but they haven't done it through the same lens that we see it from. So let me start by introducing and welcoming Dr. Terry Carter. Terry is the Director, Education Program and Project Management at Millennium Enterprise, an IT service management consulting and service company. Previously, she was the director of philanthropy of the Philanthropy Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. She also served as an executive leader for multiple health organizations and also was the national marketing leader at Verizon. Welcome, Terry. Next, I'd like to introduce Rick Brindle. Rick has been an important player in the packaged goods industry since 1977. During his career, Rick's held leadership positions with Mondelez International, Kraft Foods, Nabisco, Procter & Gamble, and Safeway Food Stores. Welcome, Rick. And finally, Nora Toure. Nora is the director of sales for Materialize, a 3D printing additive manufacturing company where she's responsible for the sales team in North America. Nora is also the creator and founder of a pretty significant nonprofit organization. In 2014, Nora founded Women in 3D Printing, one of the largest and most diverse additive manufacturing communities in the world. Welcome, Nora. And so I will take my trusty notebook, because I'm that old, and join the panelists and get right into it. Oh. I wish that was intentional, but it wasn't. All right, so we're going to kick it off with Terry. And part of this is, let's take a minute each to kind of explain why you agreed to join this panel and why this subject matter is important to you.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you for having me. I believe that I bring a pretty diverse experience. Actually, I've kind of peeked through your lens. I've come full circle with my career, having worked right across the street from this hotel at the old Washington Convention Center, and worked on the feasibility studies for the new convention center. And it was at a time when everyone was just going big. And we kept trying to figure out, how do we get 1,000 feet of contiguous convention center space? And so, and then I went on to work for Verizon, where we were a large exhibitor, large sponsor, so yet another lens. And today I'm with an IT company, and I serve in various roles, either as an exhibitor, an attendee, or presenter. So I've had the opportunity to see through various lenses, and I do feel like I'm right back home, though. So I see a few people here that I remember from back in the day. I won't say how old I am, but it's been a little while, but it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Rick, first of all, congratulate Rick on his 40th wedding anniversary.
It was a much heavier lift for my wife.
So Rick, I know that in many of our conversations, we talked about just how complex an organization you worked in and how changes were important and happening, and you were right in the middle of all of that. So a little bit about yourself and why this is important to you.
Sure. Just real quick, I'm married 40 years as of last week, and we had a wonderful time in Kiowa Island with the family. 3 children, 3 adult children, 2 beautiful daughters-in-law, a future son-in-law who I'm very proud of, and 2 grandchildren. So that's Rick Brindle right there. And I have been around for a while. I mean, my gosh, when you gave me that date, I was thinking, wasn't Carter in office when I? That's a long time ago. But done a lot. Was able to work with both sides of the desk, retailer as well as CPGs, big, large CPGs. And let me just put a quick plug in for Mondelez. Terrific company, great culture, great leaders, great brands. So, and we're hiring. So if you're interested, give us a call. MondelezCareers.com. I've always been very focused upon building organizations that are focused on continual improvement, open, honest collaboration, and breakthrough results. If you're in the food business, you start getting comfortable with 3 to 5% business growth, which is good. But I always wanted to double the business idea. So what I often did was start new verticals within my company. And like, for example, with Procter & Gamble, early on in the club vertical, retail vertical, early on in the mass vertical, even Farm and Fleet And these were verticals that we weren't playing in until me and a bunch of other folks got involved. Started the global e-commerce division for Nabisco, which then became the global e-commerce division for Kraft. So, and so I understand that slide you put up really brought it home, because I think corporate America, there's a lot of hesitancy for risk, I should say.
Yeah, well said.
So you've got that. But the last 20 years, so 46 years in the industry, the last 20 years, I've led industry development, which is what I take advantage of your output and appreciate it. You do a lot of great stuff. Averaged about 40 events a year. We're on the road about 50 weeks a year. So between 45 and 50 weeks a year. Large events, small events, conferences, shows, meetings, all of that. And I will tell you, in my experience, relationships runs business. It fuels business, and relationships lead to strategic partnerships, and then the strategic partnership gets you to that breakthrough business growth that I'm so in love with. Yeah. And the work that this body does and industry does, I believe, is an incredible enabler to partnerships, to relationships, strategic partnerships, and competitive advantage and breakthrough business results. So I'm incredibly passionate about the association world, and I had the, we'll get into it later, but I see a lot of opportunity.
Perfect.
Particularly since COVID.
Thank you, Rick. Nora, lots of dimensions. We'll cover them as we move forward, but why this particular area is important to you?
Yeah, so as you put it earlier, I am not an event executive. However, I am an attendee, an exhibitor, a sponsor, as a sales executive in the tech industry. I also happen to be the head of a fairly large organization, as you mentioned earlier, and I know we'll cover it a bit more. So head of a global community. And I also happen to be a multiracial, multi-citizen, millennial, female mother. So pretty much checking some of the boxes of the attendees you now want to get. So hoping to share my perspective from all those labels.
Well said.
So,
well said. And so I think with that, and part of the original conversation with Sam, we wanted to bring these unique perspectives to this audience to ensure that we check against some of the things that we talk about. And again, a lot of the things we heard this morning, we were sitting with each other and kind of looking at it, but I go back to, I know that Freeman covered their new report. Obviously, this was a report that resonated with me. It was important because it identified the NGen word in there, which was the next generation event goer. And I thought that that was a very important component in it. And again, I will go quickly for the sake of time, but it said that there was a sea change that was occurring in the industry. There was going to be a pretty significant change. And unless we were paying attention to it, we were going to lose out on a huge opportunity, but also take on unimaginable risk unless we could recognize this demographic and generational shift. This was a paradigm shift. This was, the data clearly suggests the most strategic step is to recognize that there are new attendees on the horizon, that they don't look like us, right? And I'll say us on this side, not to offend anyone, but they are younger, more diverse, and different. And with that, their expectations are different. Talked about the demographic profile, average age of 51. We heard this morning that that's come down, but it's still not anywhere near to the group that will be making these decisions. These are the same people who during COVID decided that they survived without being at a trade show. So they're coming back looking for real explanations as to why they should be spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to be at an event. This is a younger and more diverse community of attendees attracted to experiential learning, We heard from the previous presentation, integrated experiences, value adds. They have prioritized work-life integration. Unlike Rick and I, they actually have work-life balance. So our generation was proud. We wore it like a badge of honor when we worked 110 hours a week. It was a competition of who worked more. That's not what this group is bringing in. Research shows that age and gender serve as the greatest predictor. You can look at all the statistics you want, but you cannot avoid demographics. It's a crucial element of our industry that we have to pay attention to. They will not respond to a one-size-fits-all event strategy. So we can put all the bells and whistles we want into an event. If it's not appealing and satisfying their needs, they're not coming back. They're not going to walk up and down the aisles for 5 days trying to figure out what they're going to discover. They can do that here in 2 seconds. I'm reminded by my daughter every day how quickly she has access to information. So unless we can tailor our events to their needs, they will be moving on. We lost sight of a critical generational shift in the making because we were really busy surviving a major pandemic. So we were unable to kind of focus on some of these areas for a pretty big reason. We talk about value. Let's not lose sight of value. At the end, everyone and everything we do leads to an output, that value. If we don't pay attention to all of the insights that we're getting from the marketplace and we don't adjust our priorities to meet them, we will not be able to attract that next generation event goer. This would be a missed opportunity. So part of our next Q&A with our panelists will focus particularly on value, opportunities, and community. And so this is a community. The next generation event goer is a community defined by diversity, age, gender, et cetera. We know that they will continue to increase. I know that in my conversations with Terry, we talked a lot about you have an opportunity to bring more people to your event if you focus on the communities you don't have. So, with that, we'll jump right into it. And we'll start with Rick, and we'll talk about value. And Rick, the thing that I wanted to ask you is, from your perspective, how do changing demographics and this next generational shift, what's your perspective on that and value?
Well, first of all, those slides were spot on. I mean, think of me as boots on the ground. And I will tell you the last year, and I made this comment a while back because it really hit me like a brick wall. It was the first time in 20 years that I felt like I've never introduced new buyer to new seller more than last year. And that told me that there was an incredible amount. We all knew there was an incredible amount of churn. But you think about it, when we had COVID, we really had 3 years of pent-up attrition. If you were going to retire in 20, you didn't retire in 20. It'd been crazy to retire in 20. You're getting paid to stay home. 21, the same way. And so 22, if you were looking for a job in those 3 years, or if you were thinking of retiring, that's when it happened, 22, 23. So all these folks are new. And you mentioned 64%, or somebody did this morning, I think it was Ken, 64% new folks. I would say it's more than that on the customer or the attendee side, much more than that. And not only that, the point is right on that CFOs, it was tough coming out of COVID because they're like, hey, do we need a sales force? I mean, we crushed it in 21 and 22, and we didn't make a sales call. We didn't get on a plane. What do we need? So that created a lot of conversation and also around going to events and conferences and conventions. So I definitely think we need to be wary of that, and I definitely think that the value quotient has gone up, the ROI has gone up, and I do believe the budgets have gone down. And then complicate that with a whole new group of decision makers in these roles, decision makers that my generation, if you will, we would go to these events to pan for gold. We would say there's got to be an opportunity here somewhere. So we went and looked for these opportunities, brought it back to the company. The new generation is incredibly strategic, and very focused on their role and their output, and they're not looking to pan gold. They want to have a very efficient, all-encompassing event that is right on strategy for them. How can I leverage this piece? And and they're also telling us that they want. I'm hearing a lot of this comment: fewer, bigger, better. I'm hearing that everywhere. Fewer, bigger, better. And what I kind of read that as being is must-go events. We need to have must-go events. And for the attendees, you need to make it, shorten the learning curve for them, mentor them, make sure that even, and we're typically willing to go a few times to an event before we make the call. They won't. They'll make the call the first time. So think about that as you're planning your events. Think about how can we mentor these folks? How can we include them in the planning? How can we abbreviate their learning curve so that they get every ounce of value out of this event, and they don't leave anything on the table when they leave. And then there's other things like weekends. I'm hearing they don't want to be out on the weekends. Well, neither did I, but this group actually is going to do something about it. So there's a lot of discussion about, how do you manage that weekend? And the final point that I picked up, and this isn't just Rick. This is Rick talking to the 14 associations that I've worked with, senior levels. I'm hearing, that the strike zone sweet spot is about 2 nights out. Those things are all tactics, but just think about that. I think about my generation. For my entire life, we've been talking about health and well-being. We didn't do anything about it, but we talked a hell of a lot about health and well-being, okay? This is the first generation that's actually doing it. They're putting their money where their mouth is, or in some cases, their parents' money where their mouth is, but they're putting their money where their mouth is. They care about experiences. We just did a snack report. I don't want to go over, but I'll tell you one more thing. We do an annual snack report, and people are snacking. These last 2 generations are snacking more than they're mealing, meaning that they may be eating 1 or 2 meals a day. They're eating 4 or 5 snacks a day. So they've changed the role of snacks. The role of snacks has now become purposeful. It's become, I want energy, or I want nourishment. That's changed how Mondelez is going to business. That's changed how all the snack companies are going to business. So we got to think about that also in our convention and work.
That's great. Sure. Terry?
Well, I challenge you on that, Rick. I've been snacking all day all my life, so I don't know.
Put her there. You're a fine American.
That's right.
Oreo.
That's right. No, but I absolutely agree. I think that the way the people are looking at work has changed, and we can either hate the pandemic for that, or we can be grateful for the pandemic for that. And so regardless of where you stand, that's just where we are today. We've got to change how we think about it. I don't know if we want to go right into
by all means,
the whole mindset that we were chatting about. I loved, I think it was Brad Sousa talked about, the healthy intention or healthy tension. That's what it was. I encourage everyone to keep the pandemic mindset. Because disruptors are there, and your slide for Netflix was dead on. We all see it. We see it every day in our music, how we're eating, right? Expect to be disrupted. And you're going to be disrupted because your customer is changing. When I worked at the convention center many moons ago, being a Black female was an anomaly in your industry. And my boss, the deputy general manager, to be a deputy general manager as a Black female was unusual as well. But I look across the room, and there are so many more women here. And the youth are incredible. And today, I build innovation centers for pre-K through 12. And we're teaching your children machine learning at the pre-K level. So how they think and their voice is going to be very different from what you see in this room today. Their expectations are different. And I really loved Fernando's conversation regarding the different ways that we need to, the value propositions. 7, that's great, but I challenge you, you will probably have many more, because the way people are approaching work and the way what their expectations are, and I tend to believe people are coming to work feeling a lot more confident, because in their social media channels, they've got 5,000 people following them. They are now influencers, and they can change, you know, the dynamics of your business and what you do with one single comment. And so I challenge everyone to constantly look for and prepare to be disrupted. And even the new engagement that we saw earlier, phenomenal. It's phenomenal, but I encourage you to even think beyond that, because these kids now, they are brilliant. We're training them to be so much smarter than us. And so they're gonna look at cost. I read a statistic from the Trade Marketing Group that said, you know, it's about 400 miles that the average attendee has to travel to get to a convention. So you factor in the cost of traveling, staying. You know, the first thing I know when I was at Verizon that they cut was marketing. And so, and we sponsored everything. We had our name on the arena over here. And, you know, at some point you start looking at, is that where I'm getting the most value from? Yep. And so I would say the voice of your customer is going to be that exhibitor, attendee that you aren't paying attention to. I had a conversation with Ken last night too, and he said, you know, 50% of the smaller exhibitors don't tend to come back year over year. And so they don't really focus on them. And I go, wow, that's 50% of opportunity.
Right, absolutely.
You know, who are they? And he had a good point. He said they may not even be in business the next year. And that's true for a small business. I said, but who are they? And could you have kept them in business based upon the relationships and the engagement that could have been had through that trade show?
And I think that's part of the key thing. Like, we talk about value, we talk about transformation, voice of customer. Ultimately, it all leads and lends itself to community. And so part of why Nora is with us, because she kind of can speak to it, and will in a second, in terms of the value of the community and how you can actually start with that side of the equation that can lead to the value and the influence. So Nora, if you can pick up on that, that'd be great.
Sure. Maybe just since we're still also on the value, and maybe
Yes.
then transition
Thank you.
real quick to the community as well. But I think, so I'm obviously agreeing with everything that Rick and Terry has said, so I want to repeat. However, I think the challenge now is that we're all in a transition phase where you have two kind of demographics, where you have more loyal attendees who take pride in traveling for 50-ish weeks in a year, which no way in hell I'm doing this. And I'm not traveling on weekends, so
Probably kept me married for 40.
Different segment.
Yeah. But I think the expectation for every attendee is to go to an event and having a safe space, a safe and respectful experience. And again, the biggest challenge here is that we're more outspoken as well about diversity traits, right? So even in my introduction today, I gave you all of my diversity traits right away, and I am not ashamed of them, and some of them are really visible. But when you go to a trade show, to a conference, any kind of event, you go with way more than your LinkedIn cover, way more than your business cards. You go with your gender, your age, the color of your skin, your religion, your sexual orientation. All of it is your person. The whole person goes to an event. And again, when we're talking about new demographics, that is something that needs to be taken account for, because that does mean that sometimes it's not a safe place for everyone in the room anymore. So that would be my biggest expectation, right, from this new change, is to make sure that it is a safe space for everyone.
So everyone wants to hear the story, and so take a couple of minutes and talk about women
can
in
do.
3D
Sure.
printing.
Yeah, and actually the reason why, that's actually a long text to have up there.
No, that's for them to read while you're.
Okay, I'm definitely not reading this. But yeah, no, I can speak though about the reason why I even started Women in 3D Printing in the first place. It was from a bad experience I actually got on a trade show. And I should say it's been a series of bad experiences, but one in particular, long time ago, that left me quite defeated and feeling unwelcomed in the industry I'm still involving in, 3D printing. Almost resigned, left the entire industry, was like, I'm done. I don't belong there. And my response was to create this group because I realized that I needed to find my people. I need to find my network, my community. Since then, it really extended. So it's still called Women in 3D Printing, but it's appealing to a bigger crowd. So we have a lot of people of color, the LGBTQ+ community, who's also part of Women in 3D Printing now. And I think the reason why it attracted so many people is that, again, it is a safe space. That's what we're providing. And I think you have maybe a slide with some numbers showing the community.
Because again, for those who don't know, it's like, wow, what a nice venture. And then you see this, and you realize that this has grown to be a pretty significant community.
Yes, and so the reason why I wanted this slide up now is that, so we've 30,000 plus members. We have a global outreach, so we're in almost 40 countries, actually over 40 countries now. It keeps growing, over 100 chapters. And so the chapters are really important because one of the activities of the chapters globally, and really we are every continent, is that our ambassadors are doing local events. And those can be all the way from very casual happy hours to having guest speakers, factory tours, etc. Because again, 3D printing, so pretty cool to see the machines in action. So people usually love our factory tours. But to also do Women in 3D Printing happy hours at major trade shows. And so we have, 4 or 5, actually maybe more than that, anyway, every year at major trade shows. And at those happy hours that we have at trade shows, it's about 200 to 300 people who sign up and come to those events. And I think the reason why is that it provides a safe space. So you go to a trade show, you listen to the conference all day, you speak to all your vendors you need to talk to, and then you know you're gonna have a space and time in that trade show where you will be able to connect professionally to still have the networking that you need, but with people who have the same value as you, who do respect you, and who do value inclusiveness and diversity. And that makes a big difference because you feel a little bit more in a safe space.
Yeah, and it really is, and it's a perfect segue, certainly from our side, which I can represent, the idea of connecting with an organization that has a built-in valuable community that's prepared to bring them to your event if you can respect those boundaries is a major opportunity. And with that, I'll move to our last question as our clock ticks down at a ferocious pace.
It's stressing.
It's like, oh my God, there's 3 minutes left. And really, the last question, which is really about opportunities, and the question to Terry really is around how do we leverage all of this to create opportunities. And I know, Terry, you had a wonderful line that you shared with me in terms of you can focus on those you have, and you're not suggesting we stop, but you also have to focus on those you don't. So I'll let you pick it up.
Absolutely. I encourage you to find the customer that you don't see, the customer that you don't normally interact with. I encourage you to look at those lists of customers who haven't returned to your exhibits and your conventions year over year, and just do some research as to why. I would even encourage you to ask your seniors in high school, what is a convention and what would they get from it? Because they're gonna give you a whole different voice around what their expectations may be from a convention, because they are the ones who are going to replace us.
Yeah, and I think for us, the idea that we don't have enough young attendees, great opportunity. We don't have enough women coming to our events. Perfect opportunity. We need to embrace diversity as an opportunity. But again, equally important on the other side of that is to ensure that It's not just in a brochure or a pamphlet that says we embrace all comers, but you actually build programming and ways to engage and create those interactive experiences that we all talked about. Again, I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to jump ahead to the last part of our segment, and we appreciate everyone hanging in there with us, which really revolves around, we wanted to make sure from our unique perspectives that we left everyone with a key takeaway in the few minutes that we have left. And again, for me, it's important as I represent the event organizer community, it is crucial to change the internal mindset. It is crucial to fight hard to create those programs. We heard from the AV group before the Infocom, and I apologize for butchering the name, the value of those integrated experiences, those value-added components, those entertainment components. It's crucial that you fight the internal battle to get the investment to create those programs. Unless you can change the internal mindset, I don't care if you're a non-for-profit, a for-profit, a small, you have to start investing in attracting and fulfilling to that new demographic. It is not a one-size-fits-all. Rick, your one takeaway?
I'm going to cut this really short. I think you need to treat your event like it's a brand. How do you build your brand? How do you continue to develop your brand year round, not just the few months before and the few months after? And there's a lot that goes with that. I'd be happy to talk to you after the show.
I'm next? No, I don't know.
Yeah, community, sure.
Oh, okay.
Go right ahead.
I would say actually with opportunities, and you mentioned earlier, every new group that you bring is an opportunity, but with opportunity comes responsibilities, and your responsibility is to make sure it remains a safe space for everyone, every attendee, especially new ones that comes in. So make sure to create a safe space for them.
And Terry?
I will leave you with be disruptive. Plan to be disruptive and look for the customers you aren't seeing and try and hear them. Listen to the voice of those customers that you don't see.
Thank you. And so to quickly summarize, and I'll put it all together neatly for everyone, you have to change the internal mindset. We talked about the don't miss your Oreo moment. The backdrop to that is Oreo was successful, huge brand, tremendous success. They still diversified. They still changed the flavors, changed the colors. And as Rick was explaining in some of our meetings, that was a pretty ferocious internal battle. But revenue more than doubled after they diversified. And so if Oreo can change, our events can change. Let your community show you the way. Nora talks passionately about, and again, there was never enough time in this session to really get into what Nora's accomplished with this unique community. This is a global community that has the ability to go to any additive manufacturing event, organizer, and say, if you're interested in my community, cater to it. Because we will not bring the community to you just for the sake of increasing your numbers. So there is a partnership and an investment that's required there. Finally, your customer's voice from Terry. You've got to listen to your customers. They have the youth we talk about, the diversity we talk about, they have active voices, and yet we continue to kind of go after the same attendees. We look at reports that say how far off are we on trending, but we don't take the time to look at what are those new opportunities that we can pursue in addition to those areas. And then Sam, you told me to make sure I do this, so I will. The last piece of this, which isn't a key takeaway, but a collective key takeaway, remember that with opportunity comes great responsibility. Right? We're bringing these folks to our events, to our conferences. They represent different backgrounds, different mindsets, different expectations. Go back and visit your code of conduct. Go back and refresh your code of conduct. Make sure you're providing outreach opportunities so that when Nora runs into an issue, she's not left alone, bewildered, and wondering why no one was there to help her. Whether that's an app, a 24-hour hotline, however you do it, remember that as you embrace this new demographic, you have a responsibility to cater and nurture it and protect it from all of those who for 30 years have behaved more like the other generation. So with that, a very sincere thank you to all of you. We hope it's been a little bit entertaining and insightful.